Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make an easy fruit cake, also known as a boiled fruit cake or even a war cake. And this is what it looks like. This cake has a wonderfully moist texture. It's flavored with ground cinnamon, ground ginger, and cloves, and it's full of lots of dried and candied fruit. Now to start, the name boiled fruit cake is pretty apt here because we are going to boil some of our ingredients. So you will need like either a medium or a large saucepan. And then first put in 1 cup, which is 240 milliliters, 240 grams of just water. I'm using filtered water. And then I'm going to add 1 cup, 200 grams of light brown sugar. If you're using the measuring cups and you're not weighing your ingredients, which I do recommend weighing your ingredients, put your brown sugar into your measuring cup and kind of pat it down because brown sugar is pretty soft. So just put that in there. And then 4 tablespoons, 55 grams of butter. And then just cut your butter into cubes like that so it'll melt faster. And you can use either salted or unsalted butter. And then for our spices, I'm using 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ground ginger, and then depending, I know cloves, we're using some ground cloves. Some people do not like cloves, so you could just leave it out. I'm going to say somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 teaspoon. If you love cloves, which I do, you could use 1/2 teaspoon. If you're kind of like, not so much, you could cut it back to 1/4, or like I said, just leave it out. And then 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams, I'm using a fine kosher salt. Put that right in there. And then for our dried fruit, when I got this recipe from my cousin many years ago, and you will need 2 cups, which is 300 grams of dried fruit. Now she just used raisins, and so you could use the dark or the golden raisins. But over the years, I've kind of changed it up a bit. So what you want is the 2 cups, 300 grams total of your dried fruit. But you could use just like 1 type of raisin, 2 types of raisins, or like what I'm using is some dark, some golden. I'm using some currants, and I'm also using some dried cranberries. You could use dried cherries. You could just cut up some figs or dates or, maybe some mango. Really have fun with it and just choose the fruits that you like. Lots of fruit. What I love about this recipe, you have the traditional fruit cake that you have to make way ahead of time and then brush it with alcohol. There's no alcohol here, so good for the kids. And what's great about this, you can make it and just store it maybe overnight. You don't have to store it for weeks. So, which is really last minute fruit cake. So now what I'm going to do is put this over medium heat and just bring it up to a boil. So you can see it's coming up to the boil. So now I'm going to reduce my heat. I want it like a gentle boil, not like a real vigorous boil. And what I'm going to do is set my timer 5 minutes, and we're going to gently boil our fruit for 5 minutes. You can stir it every once in a while. Okay, so our 5 minutes is up. I'm going to take that off the heat. What's really great when you do this is the water mixed with the sugar and the spices is going to make our dried fruit really plump and flavorful. So it's a great idea to do this. So now what I do is I'm just going to put the cover on the pot. Obviously this is really hot. We can't add the rest of our ingredients yet. So I'm going to let this cool down to lukewarm to the touch. That could take, depending on your kitchen, I find about an hour. So we're going to do that, and then when we come back, we will make our batter. So our dried fruit mixture, I let it cool for about an hour and it's lukewarm to the touch. So now we are ready to make the rest of our batter. So first, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius, and then you will need a loaf pan. This one is 8.5 by 4.5 by 3-inch deep. So that's 21.5 by 11.5 by 10 centimeters. Now you could just spray your loaf pan with one of those nonstick sprays, but what I've done is just melted a little bit of butter and then with the pastry brush the bottom and the sides, make sure it's well greased. You don't want it sticking. Okay, get those corners. And then what I like to do is take just a small piece of parchment, put that down, and make doubly sure it doesn't stick. And then I'm just going to give it a light brushing of the butter so it doesn't stick to the bottom of our cake. Okay, there we go. So now, have your mixture in a large bowl. We don't need an electric stand mixer or hand mixer, just going to do it by hand. So what I have here is 1.5 cups, which is 195 grams of all-purpose flour, plain flour. To that, I'm adding 1 teaspoon, 5 grams of baking soda, and just whisk those two together. Okay, that's that. And then another bowl, I have 2 large eggs. Have your eggs at room temperature. 2 large eggs is about 100 grams. And I'm just going to whisk those to break it up. Because we're just going to fold everything in. So I'm just with my spatula, put my beaten eggs in there. This is really easy. Good name for this cake. This is one of those ones, you need something really fast. This is a cake to make. And then I'm just going to fold in my flour along with, I'm also adding 1 cup, 150 grams. I'm using candied orange peel. I love that with all the raisins and the cranberries. You could use lemon, candied lemon peel, or the mixed peel. The one thing I will say, I love this stuff, and this cake, you know, don't just make it at Christmas. I know fruitcakes typically Christmas. I make this year round. So what I do, because I don't know about you, but where I live, I can only find the candied peel at Christmas time. So I buy a lot extra, because just check the expiry date. And then you can make this year round. So I'm just going to stir everything together and then stop. It looks good. The flour's mixed in. And we are done. Pour it into your pan. And just smooth the top. You just use the back of a spoon or an offset spatula. And now for baking. Everyone's oven is a little different. I'm going to say between 55 and say 65 minutes, or it will rise a little, not a lot, and a toothpick inserted into the center will come out clean. I do like to rotate my pan about halfway through, front to back, for even baking. So our fruit cake is done. So put it on a wire rack. Now when you do the toothpick test, first, Your cake, if you touch it, it will feel firm on the top, and then put your toothpick in the center. Bring it out, and then run your finger down your wooden toothpick and make sure it's dry, because sometimes it looks dry, but when you touch it, there'll be a wet batter, so then bake it a little longer. So what I'm going to do now is just let this sit on the wire rack in the pan let it cool for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then when we come back, we will take it out of the pan. So I let the fruitcake cool for about 10 minutes, so now I'm going to take it out of the pan. So either I've got an offset spatula, or you can just use a knife. Just run it around the inside here. Make sure it's not sticking, especially the corners. Now, let's flip this out. See, I buttered that parchment paper so then it didn't stick to the bottom of the cake. If you forgot to do that, just peel off the parchment, and then I'm just going to right it side up like that. And now what we're going to do, let this cool down completely. And then, I mean, you can serve it the same day that you make it, but I think it really benefits from covering and storing at least overnight. I find all the flavors kind of blend together, and the crust right now is a little hard, so that softens the crust, and it really, I think, benefits from that. What I do is, once it's cooled down, I wrap it in foil and then plastic wrap. So that's what I'm going to do, and then when we come back, we will try a slice. So I did cover and store my fruitcake overnight. So the crust has softened, so let's cut a slice. Oh, doesn't that look wonderful? It's just full of the dried and candied fruit. Now, you can cover and store this, I would say, probably close to a week. You can also freeze it if it lasts that long, but, oh, I just love this. And so, as you saw, it's so easy to make. Now, normally, I'm not going to do it today because we're taste testing this, but normally I like to spread some butter on there. Oh. It is a really great tasting fruitcake. There is the traditional, and if you go to the joybaking.com website or a YouTube channel, I do have a fruitcake recipe, like more traditional, where you bake it and then you brush it with alcohol for 2-3 weeks, and then that alcohol permeates the fruitcake. I do have that, so if you want that type, but this, if you kind of don't have you didn't think several weeks ahead of time and you want a fruitcake, make this one. It is so flavorful. It's got all those, the raisins we put in there, currants, dried cranberries, the candied orange peel, and then all the spices, the ground cinnamon, ginger, and cloves. Makes a really great tasting fruitcake, and it's so moist. It doesn't have a lot. We only put 4 tablespoons, 55 grams of butter, so it's not a high fat content with this bread. But, we soak the fruit in the water mixture, and then it just makes a really moist fruit cake. I just love it. Make it year-round. You can change up, like if you don't want to use the candied orange peel, substitute with maybe some chopped nuts. So it's a really versatile bread. It is so good. You must make it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.